How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Gage, and today I'm going to be going over the Paleozoic deck profile. I'm playing around with some different viewing angles and playing around with the lighting, so let me know how this works for you. If you have any suggestions on how to be able to make the content even better, I'm always going to be listening. I'm going to try to respond to as many comments as possible. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to hop right into the deck profile. Alright, so today I'm going to be starting out with 3 Swap Frog. So this card essentially helps you to get your other frog monsters from the deck into the graveyard. And the reason that you want to do that is because by helping get the other frogs into the graveyard, they are able to special summon themselves from the graveyard, which gives you even more access to things like Link material and Xyz material. The primary goal of the deck is to try and special summon out as many monsters as possible so that you have access to a wide variety of tools at your disposal. Swap Frog is one of the best combo starters and extenders just because of the fact that he is able to easily get you resources from the deck. I'm also playing 3 Doop Frog. So Doop Frog is not only just one card that you want to send to the graveyard off of Swap Frog's effect, but he also has the effect where if he's on the field, your opponent can only target him with attacks. So you're actually able to create a lock of some sorts where if your opponent doesn't deal with the Doop Frog, then they're going to be stuck. Because if you have another monster on the field, like Totally Awesome, or you have another boss monster on the field, you can use Doop Frog to take the damage, basically take the hit that your other monster would have taken. He can also, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can actually add a frog monster from the deck or the graveyard and add it back to your hand. So he's essentially a floater as well, which can be really useful in certain circumstances. I'm also playing 3 Ronan Tonkin. So this guy is going to be one of the best cards in the deck because he's the one that allows you to banish a frog to special summon himself. So you're almost always going to want to normal summon the Swap Frog, send a Ronan Tonkin to the graveyard so that if the Swap Frog is sent to the graveyard, now on your next turn, you can just banish the Swap Frog and special summon him. So you basically always have access to a monster on the field. He is essential to helping get the combos of the deck going. The reason that I run 3, because a lot of decks run 2, but the problem is that if someone banishes the Ronan Tonkin and you don't have access to get to it anymore, say you did only have 2 copies and you just ran the 1, if you didn't run the 3 copies, you just ran the 2. If someone banishes that, now you're only down to being able to special summon 1 monster, which unfortunately just isn't good enough. It also gives you a higher probability of having frogs in your hand. So the Swap Frog's best utilized when you have Swap Frog in your hand and another frog. So because Swap Frog can special summon itself by sending a frog to the graveyard, which means not only do you get the free summon, but you also get the frog that you want in the graveyard anyway. So by having 3 copies of him and Doop Frog, you're increasing the probability that you'll draw into the Swap Frog and something else. And then, on the same note, I'm playing 2 Flipflop Frog, precisely for the reasoning that I gave beforehand. You want to draw into as many of your frogs as possible so that you at least have something to be able to put onto the field for Xyz material or Link material. It also has kind of an effect that doesn't come up too often but can help in certain circumstances where if he's flip face up, he can actually send a monster from the opponent's side of the field to the hand, which can be really useful if you're dealing with problematic boss monsters. I'm also playing 2 Lost Wind and 1 Breakthrough Skill. So these are essentially to help you to negate monster effects, but at the same time, there's also another card in the deck that helps to get these into the grave, and it can be really useful for having an effect negation in a pinch. So, because when this is in the graveyard and your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, you can actually set this card to your side of the field and then pretty much use it immediately. Breakthrough skill, if it's in the graveyard and it's not the same turn that it was sent there, it could actually banish itself from the grave and negate an opponent's monster effect, which having these at your disposal, and you don't even need to have them in your hand. Just being able to get them into the graveyard can already give you a lot of advantage towards being able to stop some of your opponent's plays. I'm playing 3 Paleozoic Dino Missus, probably the best one in the deck. So all of the Paleozoic monsters have 2 major effects. One is that they are protected from monster effects, and when they're in the graveyard and you activate a trap card, you can special summon it to your side of the field as a level 2 Aqua-type monster, which of course can be used for Xyz material and Link material. Again, like I mentioned, you want to be able to get as many monsters out onto the field, and since the traps can special summon themselves from the grave as monsters, that gives you even more access to different resources. Now, those are the 2 main effects that all the Paleos share, but each Paleo has its own unique effect as well. This one, you can discard a card and target one card on the field and banish it, which of course is very powerful. I'm also running 3 Paleozoic Hallucigenia. This card allows you to half the attack of your opponent's monster, which can be really useful if the monster has a lot of attack, but especially since your Totally Awesome only has a base attack stat of 2200. So as long as you're able to get your opponent's monster to something less than Totally Awesome's attack, that can really save you. I'm also running 3 Paleozoic Canadia. So this card allows you to target a monster on the field and put it into face-down defense position. Unfortunately, it is not as strong as it used to be, since this card doesn't really affect Link monsters, since they can't be put in face-down defense position. However, it is still good for putting monsters that can be put into face-down defense position, like monsters that your opponent would use as Link material. So it's nice to be able to shut down your opponent's ability to use that monster as Link material, because it can prevent them from extending even further. So not as useful as it used to be, but still can be a hindrance on your opponent. I'm also playing 3 Paleozoic Marella. This is a card that allows you to send any trap, not just the Paleos, any trap to the grave. So that's why I mentioned earlier, Lost Wind and the Breakthrough skill can be sent to the graveyard using this card's effect. Not to mention, if you already have access to Lost Wind or Breakthrough skill, some form of effect negation, you could just send itself to the grave, and now you have even more Paleos in the grave for you to be able to special summon. So yeah, this card is really good at helping to extend the plays and keep the combos going. I'm also playing 2 Paleozoic Olanoids. Unfortunately, there aren't too many decks that are playing a lot of set spells and traps, or just continuous spells or field spells in general. So this card isn't as powerful, especially if your opponent isn't playing any spells and traps at all, in which case you're pretty much going to have to use this to pop your own stuff, which is never ideal. So that's why I'm running 2 copies. It just does not have... obviously, you want to run it because it has Paleo in its name, and you want as many Paleos in the deck as possible, but it's not always useful in a wide variety of applications, especially if you have to use it to destroy your own spell and traps. So I just run the 2, but if you really feel as though you need the extras, I would consider running the 3 as well. I am also playing 2 Paleozoic Leoncalia. So this card allows you to target a banished card and return it to the grave. It's essentially an extender. Like I mentioned, the Ronan Tonkin is going to be banishing your frogs. This way, this card is actually one way that you can have access to those materials again. So now, if the Ronan Tonkin goes back to the graveyard, you now have another frog monster in the grave for you to be able to use to banish to special summon the Ronan Tonkin. This is really good. And then one of the newest cards that I'm actually playing, 3 Crackdown. So this recently came out in dual power, and it is extremely powerful. So this essentially allows you to take your opponent's monster. You can't attack or use its effects, but who cares? If you're able to steal your opponent's boss monster, that can be a huge hindrance, and honestly, can help win you the game. Not to mention, you can end up using your opponent's monster as link material so that you can continue to go off into your own plays as well. I highly recommend Crackdown, not just in Paleos, but in any trap-based deck. I'm also running 1 Mistake and 1 Storming Mirror Force, just utility cards to be able to protect my monsters from attacks and to be able to prevent my opponent from searching. I'm also playing 1 Solemn Strike and 1 Solemn Warning. Only playing 2. You could play 2 strikes or 2 warnings, but the main thing being that you're playing a trap deck, so you want to be able to have access to powerful trap cards like these and prevent your opponent from special summoning crazy monsters. But at the same time, like I mentioned, you want to see the Paleos as much as possible so that you can bring them back from the grave to use as material. So you don't want to run too many non-Paleo trap cards. But still powerful cards nonetheless. And then the only spell card I'm playing in the deck, 3 Card of Demise. Honestly, this is one of the best cards for draw power that this deck can play. It essentially says draw 3 cards. And then, yes, you're going to have to discard your hand at the end of the turn, but most of your cards are frogs or paleo traps. So you want them in the graveyard anyway. So not only are you getting all of the things that you want set up in the graveyard already, but you get to draw 3 cards. That is just insanely powerful. So I highly recommend running at least 3 Card of Demise. You want to draw into this card as much as possible. It is just an essential piece of draw power. And yeah, now that it's gotten reprinted, it's also very inexpensive. So I highly recommend picking these cards up. Now to go over the extra deck, I am playing the one, the only, Totally Awesome. So this guy, no pun intended, is just awesome. He is one of the best boss monsters in the game, and honestly the reason that I love playing this deck. Just being able to bring him out on the field gives you such a sense of security. Knowing that you can essentially just prevent your opponent from doing anything by just negating spells and traps or monster effects, that's just too good. Not only that, but he's a floater. He can special summon frogs during each standby phase, so bringing out even more resources. Once he comes out onto the field, he is a huge threat, and honestly, your opponent has to deal with him, or else it's just going to spiral out of control, and honestly, your opponent might not be able to recover. You need to run 3 copies of Totally Awesome if you're playing a Paleozoic-Frog deck. Oh, and then one last thing about Totally Awesome. People forget that the card that you negate, so say you negate a spell or trap or a monster effect, once you negate that monster, you can actually set that card on your side of the field. So if someone activates Raigeki, for example, you can negate it with Totally Awesome's effect and set the Raigeki to your side of the field, and now you have access to it. That is just crazy. I'm playing 2 Miss Starboy, the absolute most necessary link monster to play in the deck. It requires 2 water monsters, which all of your Paleos and all of your frogs are water monsters. It opens up 2 extra zones, so extra zones that you can bring out Totally Awesome or another extra deck monster to, or in certain circumstances, 2 Totally Awesomes to each of those link zones that he's pointing to. Miss Starboy is great. He buffs all of your water monsters by 500 attack. Depending on the deck you're playing, the nerf to fire-type monsters is also relevant as well, especially with Salamangrates out there. They don't realize, like, oh, wow, I completely forgot that it also nerfs fire-type monsters as well. So, you know, they have to watch out for Miss Starboy. And of course, he helps you float into other monsters as well. So when he's destroyed from the field, you can add a frog, a water monster to your hand, which is pretty good. Landfornicus, I'm running this card because it just says that you need 2 monsters, so he is essentially for Crackdown. So when you steal your opponent's monster with Crackdown, oftentimes, it might not necessarily be a water monster that you can use to go into Miss Starboy. Landfornicus essentially helps you to get to use the monster that you stole from your opponent, and it can be anything because it just requires 2 monsters, so pretty good card. I'm also playing 1 Paleo-Opabenia and 1 Paleozoic Amonolacaris. These are really great cards in their own way, being able to target any card on the field and just destroy it, or add any Paleo trap from the deck to your hand, and then activate the trap. It gives you the ability to activate traps, Paleozoic traps, from your hand. So all of your when this is on the field, all of your Paleo traps essentially become spell cards, which is just too insane. When he's on the field, he is essentially your Swiss Army knife to be able to handle a wide variety of threats that your opponent might have on the board. I'm also playing a bunch of other utility cards. The Phantom Knights of Cursed Javelin, Sky Cavalry Centauria, Cat Shark, and Digesto Phoenix. Being able to attack twice or double your attack, send a monster from the field to the hand, or make a monster's attack 0. These can just come up in many different ways, and it's honestly just nice to be able to know that you have access to utility cards this way in the event that you need it. I'm also playing 1 Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. This is a Waking the Dragon target. I am playing that in the side deck, so when that card is destroyed, you can special summon any monster from your extra deck. This card is unaffected by all card effects, and it has 3,500 attack. When this is on the field, you win. So, yeah, it's if you're playing Waking the Dragon, you need to have this card in your extra deck, because why not? I'm playing 1 Boreload Dragon. Any deck that's able to spam out a bunch of monsters needs to play this card. You can steal your opponent's monster. That is just too good. Any card that allows you to take your opponent's monster, to be able to get rid of any threat that might be in your way, he is just too good. And of course, he's unaffected by monster effects and has 3,000 attack. So at least 1 Boreload Dragon in the extra deck, please. And then one of the newest cards, a lot of cards that people might not know about, and is honestly an incredibly strong asset, Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax. This card is insane. So he essentially, if I could afford Boreload Dragon, I would, but unfortunately that card is too expensive. But this card honestly helps to replace him. Not only can your opponent not target this card with card effects, but during damage calculation, he actually, during battle, he gains the attack of the monster that he's battling. Which means that if you're going up against an Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, you can actually, if he's battled, he gains 3,500 attack. So he can essentially beat over anything. He's a Link 4 and only requires 2 monsters special summoned from the extra deck, which the Paleos can do that really easy by bringing out Miss Starboy or Totally Awesome. If you need access to a card that can pretty much beat over anything, this is honestly one of the greatest alternatives to Boreload Dragon. So I highly, highly recommend him as a budget option. And honestly, he is just a really cool card in general. I'm going to quickly go over the side deck. I am playing 2 extra copies of Mistake, just in case. 3 copies of Rivalry of Warlords in the event that it comes up. Very powerful Floodgate. 3 Heavy Storm Duster in the event that I'm going up against a crazy, another crazy trap deck, or a deck that plays a lot of field spells, or basically whatever I need to destroy off of Heavy Storm Duster. And, of course, Imperial Order to shut down spell decks. More spell hate. I am playing Anti-Spell Fragrance. If I'm going up against Sky Strikers, this is something that I essentially, as a Paleo player, have to run, because Sky Strikers can be a huge, huge problem. So you need something to be able to shut down spell cards, and Honestly, that extra turn that this gives you can mean everything. Playing another breakthrough skill in the event that I feel like I need an extra card to help with effect negation, and then 2, Waking the Dragons, like I mentioned earlier, for the Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon play. So guys, that is going to be it for the deck profile. Please let me know what you thought. Remember to like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and if you comment, I will do everything I can to get back to you. This has been Gage. Till next time.